Wait, why are you here? I mean, hello there! I was just checking the ship to see what's different. Look, it's a long story, but basically, I wrecked my ship and then a ghost fixed it. And it did a great job! Except it replaced my copy of Bionicle 2 with Bionicle The Legend Reborn. And also my spaghetti, so I'm currently on my way to the nearest civilized planet to buy more. I mean, everyone calls me Pasta Man all the time, so how can I eat anything but pasta, right? Actually, I think that mindset is giving me nutrient deficiency. Wait, why am I still carrying this thing around? I don't even like this movie. In fact, I've watched the previous 3 Bionicle movies several times throughout the years, yet I've only seen this one once. And I think they agreed it was bad because they couldn't even be bothered calling it Bionicle 4, despite it being the 4th movie. They didn't want any unfavorable comparisons. Well, okay, let's be fair, there's actually a pretty good reason for this. See, in the late 2000s, Bionicle wasn't necessarily struggling, but it sure was about to. Part of the issue was that the lore and storyline for Bionicle had become so complicated and spread out, it was becoming too hard to get into. See, Bionicle was a toy line first, and like all toy lines, some people will inevitably grow out of it. And so the toy line has to find a way to attract new fans if it wants to keep going, and Bionicle just wasn't doing that. So they decided to soft reboot Bionicle in 2009 by suddenly switching to a completely different location with a completely different set of characters. It was still part of the same storyline that had been going on since Bionicle's launch in 2001, but it was now different enough that you didn't have to read up on 8 years of story just to know what was happening. This is of course why Bionicle The Legend Reborn doesn't have a 4 in its title. It was part of the soft reboot, and so they didn't want you to think you had to see the previous 3 films before watching this one. And you know what? Maybe that soft reboot thing is part of why everyone, including me, dislikes this movie. I mean, this movie, as well as the year it was released in, was a vast departure from what Bionicle had been up to that point. And we all know how people tend to handle big changes. Maybe this movie just wasn't given a fair chance. So you know what? Let's watch it and see if this really is as bad as I and everyone else say it is, or if it's just misunderstood. So as the movie begins, we are shown that this movie was distributed by The End of the World, and actually made by Tinseltown Toons. Yeah, there's a reason this movie isn't considered part of the Miramax trilogy. It had nothing to do with Miramax, or Creative Capers for that matter. And you can immediately tell because this time, we actually don't start with some rocks in the sand. Instead, we see a brief glimpse of the island of Matanui, from all the way back in Mask of Light. Except it's immediately destroyed by the robot Matanui as it rises out of the water. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that up until now, pretty much the entire Bionicle storyline is taking place either inside of or on top of a giant robot. The Great Spirit Matanui, that's the robot itself. Metronui, basically the robot's brain. The island of Matanui, a piece of camouflage on top of its face. This was actually planned all the way back in 2001, yet despite numerous hints at this fact, it wasn't fully revealed until the end of 2008. Because Bionicle is cool like that. Anyway, the robot is immediately taken over by the Makuta, though he's not mentioned by name, enslaving all the people within. But Matanui's spirit survives, ejected out of the robot inside the so-called Mask of Life, and flung across space to another world. Now, I'm gonna talk about the visuals in this movie for later, you know, when I'm actually shown something to talk about, but I would like to mention that this whole scene had actually been done as a standalone animation in 2008, and my god, the difference is night and day. In the 2008 version, the robot moves slowly, all the mechanical bits on it move slowly. The bits of rock and debris move slowly. There's an incredible sense of scale and weight, which is elevated by the dramatic sunset lighting and the way the robot gets obscured by the atmosphere itself. Which is appropriate, because this robot is absolutely massive. I mean, it had to be, seeing as the entire Bionicle storyline up until now has taken place inside it. But in Legend Reborn, all that is missing. I mean, I like the eyes lighting up beneath the water and the island breaking apart and the ocean splashing around is nice, but after that, it just looks like a normal sized person standing up. If you ever watched Transformers or Pacific Rim or even just a big animal, you'll notice that they all tend to move pretty slowly, and that's because the bigger something is, the more energy it takes to move it. Not only that, but big things are viewed from a greater distance, and at those greater distances the same speeds appear slower. This is why miniature effects for things like Star Wars were filmed in slow motion. By making them move slower, you make them look bigger. And the people over at Tinseltown Toons were clearly aware of this sort of thing, since later shots in the movie are able to have a convincing sense of scale. So was this scene just a last minute addition or something? But whatever, I'm getting off track. After landing on the desert planet of Paramagna, the Mask of Light creates a new body for Matanui, and then he almost steps on an insect. He picks up the insect, which then gets turned into a shield by the Mask of Light. He then gets attacked by this scorpion guy, though he accidentally defeats him using his new beetle shield. This so-called Agori named Metis notices, and after a brief introduction he offers to take Matanui to the nearest village, Volcanis. They arrive just in time to witness a battle between two Glatorians, this guy called Strak, and this guy called Akar. See, back in the day, the villages of this planet used to go to war over scarce resources like food and water, but because war is kind of a mess, they decided to instead settle disputes by pitting Glatorians against each other in one-on-one battles. And that's exactly what's happening here. Akar wins, but just as he's stepping away, Strak decides to pull off a sneak attack. Matanui, deeming this as dishonorable, jumps in to help Akar. Having literally one combat experience, Matanui doesn't stand a chance against Strak. That is, until his mask turns his Stinky Sword into a big anti-Dink sword. Matanui wins, and then he and Akar head on over to Akar's cave.
Should have packed it in long before this.
But you stayed. Why?
Duty. Pride. But a Glatorian past his prime is no good to anyone.
To be defeated without a fight would be dishonor. You carry this truth inside you, as I do. You are a true Toa.
Toa?
So, funny thing about this movie, right? Matanui keeps calling people he befriends Toa, yet he never explains what a Toa is. Nor does anyone else for that matter. Now to be fair, this is the 4th Bionicle movie, so if you've been watching all of them until now and still don't know what a Toa is, that's on you. Is what I would say, but wasn't this meant to be a soft reboot? So shouldn't you maybe, perhaps, potentially, possibly, just in case, explain what a Toa is? Because the movie is saying to people who don't know what a Toa is. In fact, you just had a perfect opportunity to explain it just now when Akar asked about it, but instead the conversation gets interrupted by Metis' arrival. Kinda makes me wonder though, did Akar ever learn what a Toa is? Like off screen? Or does he just go around thinking some weird word for friend that Matanui came up with? Metis asks Matanui to become a Glatorian warrior like Akar and Strak. Matanui refuses, and then he leaves before Matanui tells Akar who he is.
My home is far from this place. On another world entirely.
Proof of what I've been saying for years.
No one's gonna question what Matanui just said. I mean, I know this Kina girl here believes in aliens, but like, I believe in aliens. I mean, I'm a space traveler, of course I do. But if someone who looked like my own species came up to me and said, yeah, I'm from space, I still wouldn't believe him without proof. Especially if he was found roaming the desert by himself, or who knows how long, and is currently talking to an insect. Anyway, since Kina wants to not be a Magna anymore because it sucks, she agrees to help Matanui in his mission, on the condition that he takes her with him to wherever he may be from. So the trio set off for some cave Kina discovered in her village, which supposedly holds some ancient equipment that might be of use to Matanui. On the way they discuss the possibility of a traitor among the Agori and Glatorian, since the Bone Hunters and Skrull, whoever they are, seem to know their every move lately. Then they get ambushed by Bone Hunters and this thing called a Scopio, which... actually, is it a vehicle or a creature? I mean, it behaves like a creature, but on its back it has what I assume is meant to be a driver. Either way, we get a pretty nice action scene out of it. They defeat the Bone Hunters and Scopio by dropping some rocks on them before continuing on to Kina's village. But they soon discover that the village has been destroyed. They find Gresh, yet another Glatorian, who says that the village was attacked by Bone Hunters and Skrull, who've joined forces. The fact that these two tribes are working together is treated as a terrifying revelation, but like, who are the Bone Hunters and Skrull? Sure, we just saw the Bone Hunters in the previous scene, but they weren't that big of a threat. In fact, a dozen of them were defeated by just 3 people, and we haven't even laid eyes upon a Skrull until now. So when you tell us that they've teamed up, it means nothing. Why should we be afraid of their combined strength if we know little if anything about their singular strengths? But I digress. They hide inside the cave Kina was talking about, where they run into the supposed thief, Berix. I say supposed because even though Kina is getting extremely worked up over how much he's thieving, he hasn't actually stolen anything that we know of. Berix repairs Crash, while the other 3 discover the secret lab, where Matanui finds the schematics for, well, himself. A gang of 5 then decide to head off to another village to warn everyone about the Bone Hunters and Skrull joining forces. But before they depart, Matanui uses his mask to make their weapons elemental. They arrive in the twin villages of Tessara just as another Glatorian match is about to begin. This time between Vestus and... oh my god, it's Teryx! He was one of the 2 Bionicles I actually had as kid before the toyline was cancelled. I can't wait to see what'll... oh. Ah well, at least Berix actually steals something. Only took him over 10 minutes in this 78-minute film to live up to his main character trait. A car stops the fight and tells everyone that the Bone Hunters and Skrull have formed an alliance, and that all the villages must work together if they are to survive. Matanui turns Teryx's weapon into a better weapon, and this makes them all agree to join forces. Oh, and then Kina and Berix are kidnapped by the Bone Hunters. In response to this, Matanui decides to go and save them by himself, while the remaining Glatorians stay behind to protect the Agori villagers. He faces off against Tuma, the leader of the Skrull and now also the Bone Hunters. I'm gonna be real with you, I forgot that Tuna existed. I mean, until now he's only had 21 seconds of screen time, so he's like the complete opposite of a build-up. Anyway, battle happens, I guess. Shut up! I can see what's happening for myself. You don't need to explain everything that's happening, because I can see it. It's called show, don't tell, not show and tell. Show and tell is something you do in school. What, you don't know what show, don't tell means? Well, don't worry, I'll get to that later. Oh boy, will I get to that later. Tima dies off a bad back. Relatable. And Matanui claims his shield in victory. But oh no, it's revealed that Metis was the traitor all along. And then... Wait, what? Huh? Why is there suddenly a swarm of insects in the shape of Lego set number 8979? I assume is, like every other Bionicle set, meant to be their own character in the Bionicle universe? Whatever the explanation for that is. Matanui frees Kina and Berix, and then the gestalt of Beetles dissolves after not hitting a single Skrull or Bone Hunter. Okay then. What was the point of that? The other Glatorian and Agori show up to join the fight, Matanui turns Metis into a snake, and then some antics ensue until the battle is won. Agori from all over Barrack Magna work to join together their villages. And it turns out that together, the villages all form a giant robot similar to the one Matanui used to inhabit. One that might prove useful in the fight to free Matanui's people. And then the movie ends on a cliffhanger that leads into a new trilogy that got cancelled because Bionicle's toy line stopped being a thing the next year.
And on that bombshell, it's time to end the show and indeed the series.
Wait, Lawrence Kasanoff? That name sounds familiar. Huh. Oh. Oh no!
Will you be my best man?
This is... I didn't know.
But yeah, that was Bionicle, the Legend Reborn. Well, that stunk. But I don't like being negative, so let's start on a initially positive note. So having been made by a completely different company, The Legend Reborn of course looks very different from the previous 3 Bionicle films, but having been made 4 years after the previous movie, it's also a huge technical improvement. The lighting is more realistic, the models don't have visibly jagged edges anymore, and the textures especially are vastly improved. I like how all the Agori and Glatorian are really worn and weathered, truly selling the idea that these guys have been struggling to survive in a desert for who knows how long. And the weathering is also an example of the improved materials. I mean, just look at the way that rust and the like from these subtle edges around itself, or how the matte paint on a car's helmet peels away to reveal this silvery metal underneath. But speaking of the characters, their designs are a mixed bag. They're far more accurate to the actual LEGO sets on the more stylized approach to the previous 3 films. And because the LEGO sets looked good, the characters in this movie also look good. Now at first glance, you might think they entirely ditched the organic bits that the Miramax trilogy was known for adding to the characters. But if you look closely, the characters in Legend Reborn do seem to still include them as occasional gap filler. Now while the characters by no means look bad in this film, I do have 2 issues with them. For one, these spinny bits are a bit distracting sometimes. Secondly, and far more importantly, the faces are kinda terrible. In an effort to make these metal faces mimic soft human faces, they decided to give all of them these sliding metal sticks around their mouths. Think of it like a low-budget version of how, in Michael Bay's Transformers movies, the titular robots' faces are made of these sliding metal plates. The problem here, however, is that because their entire mouth is made of vertical metal stripes between upper and lower jaw, it just looks like they have a toothy grin half the time. And aside from a few questionable looking close-ups, it also has the effect of making their faces look completely expressionless. Whether or not a character is smiling or frowning, it just reads the same skeletal grin. I could have at the very least respected it, if the idea was to make their metallic faces realistically solid. but their mouths still deform, stretching up and down as they talk. So why not just rely entirely on deformation like an actual face, instead of this bizarre rod method? But the weird faces are far from the worst thing about this movie's visuals. See, despite the vastly improved technology behind this film, I honestly prefer how the previous Bionicle flicks looked. Cause my god, this movie looks bland as hell. Actually, scratch that. Every depiction of hell I've ever seen has looked pretty interesting. So this movie is actually blander than hell. When I think of Mask of Light, I think of volcanoes, forests, caves illuminated by plants, etc. When I think of Legends of Metro Nui, I think of majestic architecture, these water tube things, an entire city of furnaces, and so on. When I think of Web of Shadows, I think of abandoned streets, foggy ruins, webs, obviously. When I think of The Legend Reborn, I think of desert. Yes, desert. Because almost every shot in this movie looks the exact same. Daytime desert with clear skies. Daytime desert with clear skies. Daytime desert with clear skies. There are a few exceptions, of course, and those exceptions do look nice. Our first look at Barra Magna is downright beautiful. But I swear, over half the movie has almost the exact same lighting and color palette in nearly the exact same environment. Now I get that Barra Magna is meant to be a barren desert planet, and so it should look barren and lifeless. You know, like a desert. But the Grand Canyon is technically a desert, so is the Great Salt Lake Desert, and the Atacama Desert, and don't forget the Black Desert in Egypt. And I found all of those through a 5-minute Google search. Not to mention, all of these are like real places on Earth. So what excuse does the fictional alien planet of Barra Magna have to be so samey? And I haven't even gotten into the lighting situation. Sure, if you're making a movie set in a desert, then the sun is gonna be your only light source for most of the movie. But planets like move in relation to their sun, or suns in this case, so why not play around with that? I mean, yeah, there are a couple of nighttime scenes, but why not have more scenes set at sunset or sunrise? Like here, for example, near the end of the movie. Imagine how nice it would be if they maybe put the sun in the background here. You could have had only a gory silhouetted against the sunrise for a really symbolic and stylistic effect. Also, Barra Magna has 2 moons, and again, 2 suns. So why not have a double solar eclipse somewhere? Now I do realize I might be asking a little much from a presumably low budget, straight to video kids movie, but on the other hand, the previous 3 Bionicle films were presumably low budget, straight to video kids movies, and yet those play around with lighting in unique ways all the time. So what excuse does The Legend Reborn have? Well, the excuse, or explanation rather, is that they didn't care. And I know they didn't care because of the way the movie is written. In storytelling, there's a principle known as show, don't tell. If you want to convey information, then don't just have some random character say it to you. Instead, try to actually show it somehow. Now this doesn't mean you literally can't tell. Having a character convey things like past events verbally can be a great way to quickly convey information that's important but not worth lingering on. The principle more so concerns believability. If something can kill you, show it killing someone. If a character is deceitful, show them deceiving. If a character is intelligent, show them doing something intelligent. To ignore this principle is a hallmark of lazy writing. I mean, why bother setting up an entire scene to show, say, a character trait, when you could just have some character go, oh yeah, this guy's like that, and call it a day. Because if you do, you get Bionicle, The Legend Reborn. We're told that Akari is sick of battles, yet we never see him turn down a fight. We're told that Skrull and Bone Hunters joining together is extremely dangerous, yet we've never been shown what they are capable of by themselves, so we don't buy into that danger. We're told that Berix is a thief, but because it takes so long for him to actually steal something, it just makes the other characters, especially Kina, out to be jerks, since they keep berating him for something that he, from our perspective, didn't even do. Now I will say, this issue is masked a little by the actually pretty decent voice acting. The actors clearly believe all these things that the movie tells us about the world and characters, and so it becomes slightly easier for us, the audience, to believe what the movie tells us. But even so, because the movie rarely shows proof of the things it tells us, it falls apart the moment you actually stop and think about what's going on. Incidentally, because of this whole tell instead of show issue, I don't really have much to say about the characters, except that Kina and Berix are kind of annoying. But I will mention that Matanui is a huge waste of potential, because Bionicle was a cancer metaphor. No, like, actually. During the planning of what Bionicle as a toy line would do and be, Christian Faber, the art director and co-creator of Bionicle, was suffering from a tumor. He wasn't dying, and he did eventually get rid of it, but until he did, he had to take pills to keep the tumor from getting worse. As he did, he imagined that each pill contained a tiny soldier sent to fight his cancer. And that's where the initial concept of Bionicle evolved from. The Toa, Mator, and Rahi, Makuta, and so on, they were all analogous to various cell types maintaining the many functions of Matanui's body. That's why it's called Bionicle or Biological Chronicle. It's the story of a body that fell ill as a single cell turned rogue and attacked from within, prompting its immune system to fight for the body's survival. And so think about how this metaphor applies to Matanui's story in The Legend Reborn. This normal person suddenly reduced to the equivalent of his own white blood cells, and now forced to ally himself with other single-celled organisms if he is to reclaim his own body. Imagine what a drastic change in worldview that must be, to go from basically a god to being kicked out of your own body, forced to ally yourself with beings you maybe didn't even realize were sentient. So what does Bionicle, The Legend Reborn do with such a unique concept? One that presents a million ways to tell a story with a character arc unlike anything you've ever seen before. It reduces it to being about the power of friendship, which is exactly what every kid's movie ever is about. I'm fine with them not tackling the cancer metaphor angle of it, but my issue here is that Matanui doesn't even act in line with what's happened to him. He's just depicted as a fish out of water, forced to learn about friendship or whatever. When in reality, he should be surprised just to see Midas speak. He's a fallen god, not Lightning McQueen. Now you might say that I can't expect a kids movie like this to handle such a complex topic, but Web of Shadows was a kids movie and it tackled body horror. Legends of Matanui tackled a political figure slowly abusing the trust of the people to manipulate them into letting him take over the world. I mean, it didn't do it well, but it tried. And therein lies the reason I'm even getting so worked up about all this. The previous 3 films were by no means perfect, but for all their many flaws, there was an undeniable effort to be more than just a kids movie, to tell stories that were narratively and aesthetically unique from anything else. But that effort is missing from Bionicle The Legend Reborn. Judged entirely on its own merits, Legend Reborn is... well, it's not a good movie, but it's inoffensive. Getting worked up about it would be I get mad at Barbie Fairytopia. Like, yeah, it's bad, but what were you expecting? It's a movie equivalent of Wii Shovelware. By no means a sin against God, but I was not made for any other purpose than for parents to buy to make a kid shut up for an hour or two. But Bionicle was always so much more than that. It had the balls to cover things like corruption, body horror, sacrifice, the irreversible damage of war, the terrifying consequences of genuine insanity, and so much more. And again, Bionicle from the very beginning was conceived as a damn cancer metaphor. And so with all that in mind, I do think it's fair to get worked up about Bionicle The Legend Reborn, because I know that Bionicle can be so much more than just cinematic shovelware. And all the pieces are there for this movie to be something truly unique and special, distinct from anything that's ever come before. The only missing piece was care. In the end, I guess all I can really say is that, on its own, Bionicle The Legend Reborn is just a mediocre but not outright horrendous movie. But compared to everything that came before, it just makes me frustrated in a sad and confused kind of way. But with that, perhaps overdramatic rant, I'm done with the Bionicle tetralogy of films. And I guess Bionicle in general. I mean, there was some stuff made for Bionicle Generation 2 that I could take a look at, but I think I'm gonna save that kind of words for some other time. I've been watching way too much Bionicle lately. I've started having fever dreams about this stuff. If I don't watch something different, I'm gonna end up in a padded room screaming about Bionicles. But before I do that, I'm gonna go out and actually buy some spaghetti before people get mad at me for landing a spaceship on a parking lot. They were out of spaghetti, so I bought an advent calendar instead.